Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns, and we are really happy to have a first-time guest. John Gessner represents SunThisWeek newspapers in this area. He's the managing editor, and he handles the Burnsville side of it. A lot of responsibilities. And one of the things we really haven't talked about, I mean, you have seen media individuals here, and you have seen the daily papers, and we're very fortunate that Mike Burbach of the Pioneer Press has been a regular at least once a year. Years ago, we had a couple of representatives from SunThisWeek. It wasn't, at that time, it wasn't SunThisWeek, but it is now. And John, tell us a little bit about your background and the papers and the merger of the papers.
Sure, happy to be here. And you mentioned managing editor. I'm actually co-managing editor with Tad Johnson, who's been a guest on your show.
Yes, years ago.
Yes. Well, my background is I've been there longer than anybody, for better or for worse, since the late 1980s. And the whole media, the local media scene has changed a great deal. We used to be owned by a family from Farmington called the Clay family. And they sold in about 2000 to ECM Publishers, which was a Princeton-based company that includes about 50 titles, newspapers and shoppers around the state. Now, in another twist of business, ECM was sold about 6 months ago to Adams Publishing Group, which has newspapers and shoppers and other print products in 9 states and 30 titles in Minnesota. And I believe with our addition, we're the biggest part of their group. So that's been the landscape for the last number of years.
Well, mergers are part of what we go through today in our society. However, weekly newspapers at least seem to be flourishing. Daily newspapers are certainly struggling, and we have seen that. We have seen that with falling of circulation. We've seen it with mergers. We've seen it with papers that went out of business.
Absolutely.
And to me, who wanted to be a journalist from age 13, 14, when I was writing on Long Island for a weekly, it's a very dangerous thing. I think that the importance of people being informed and advised and knowing what's going on is of really, really great importance. I always say that I'm not afraid to die, but I just want to be able to know that I'll have my New York Times every morning,
There you go.
wherever I am. So
I wouldn't be without a daily newspaper.
you just have to do it. So you've got this years of experience. And what have you seen change in the 30 plus years that you have really here locally?
Going on, I guess. In the community or in the business?
Both.
Well, on the business side, and I'm not that privy to it, I have been at various points, but really not recently. We circulate about 25,000 copies in the cities of Burnsville and Eagan. Across our 4 editions, which cover several south of the river communities, we circulate about 66,000. And
I'm going to hold up actually this week's edition, which is what we get in Burnsville and Eagan.
indeed. Now, Burnsville and Eagan used to be separate editions, but that was many years ago. The fact that they were merged as an edition is another testament to some of the pressures that companies have gone through, including ours. So those pressures continue. ECM Publishers has downsized a great deal, I'd say, over the years, from upwards of close to 600 employees to maybe in the range of 400.
The work hasn't downsized, it's just the number of people to do it.
The number of people to do it is downsized. But I still think that we're vital and respected and recognized and read in the community. Because often the feedback I get from people who have been in our paper is that they were surprised at how much recognition they received. It's easy for those in the print industry to be a little crestfallen at times about the way things have gone, but I believe we still count.
I think very much so. I actually have a scar on my arm here from what was known as the Syracuse Daily Orange, as we were dropping lead to set headlines, and some lead bounced out and hit me on the arm.
Oh my goodness.
And I live with that scar to this day. I also, after I was practicing law, I wrote a weekly column on Long Island, and actually won the Best Column Award of the New York Press Association.
Congratulations.
On one occasion. I also won a Best Column on New York Bowler on another occasion. But it was very much a part of me, and very, very, really helpful in my growth, my maturity.
Wonderful.
And, we used to go on Tuesday afternoons into the paper to make the headlines up on the stories, not just my column. So, how does that work with SunThisWeek?
It's desktop publishing.
I mean, you have to do it. It wasn't desktop publishing when I did it, but it is today. But still,
And it's not terribly complicated work, but I, at my desk computer, pretty much laid out the whole newspaper, with the exception of 4 or so pages. And
people don't recognize.
and some of those headlines get changed on the fly, by the way.
And people don't recognize the fact that layout is an important part of the newspaper. Having the material to publish, obviously, is an important part. Getting the pictures in is an important part, which are now in color, which we didn't used to have. And then making the headlines and the drops and things like that. Very important, very time-consuming.
It takes us an afternoon, that's for sure. And everything leads up to that point. The news gathering, such as going to council meetings. Nobody's favorite thing to do, but it's part of our bread and butter. And that work goes on for much of the week until we hit, in our case, Wednesday. And at some point, everything has to be done. And then you go into layout, and then you wrap that up. And then the completed pages go up through the internet, or I guess T1 lines we have. No, they're probably faster than T1. But they go up to our printing plant in Princeton, and you kind of breathe a sigh of relief. And then you start over.
But then the physical papers arrive or have to be picked up and are delivered in the case of your paper. And again, with the city locals also, there's a delivery process. And I know that Thursday afternoon, I can look out in the little mailbox we have at the curb and see the paper.
I'm glad they get to you on Thursday.
And
It's dated Friday. I believe most of our delivery is done on Thursday. Some may be Friday. The circulation department, well, it's about 1.5 people for our operation south of the river, but with many, many, many contracted carriers, and it's quite a dance to maintain, and my hat is off to those who do it.
And it really is important because, you rely on your local paper. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about. To get news of what's going on in your city, in your neighborhood, in your area, to keep up with things, you rely on your local paper. And we fortunately have had very good delivery in the last, I would say, 3-4 years.
Good.
There were times when it was a little sporadic, but people changed and things like that. And you look forward to it arriving and being up on particularly when we're doing something like this, a television show. Obviously the local news plays in, or local individuals play in, and it becomes very important for us.
Absolutely. Certainly in Egan, you live in Egan?
Yes.
Yes. The community has gone through some very exciting changes. I'm more familiar with Burnsville than Egan, but I have a good familiarity with Egan events as well. And
Egan has changed radically. Of course, we've lost 2 golf courses, but we have 2 large housing developments. And now we have the Commons, which is an unbelievable development.
it is.
And we have the Outlet Mall, which we didn't have before, over in the Cedar Grove area. We have a favorite of ours, Sharon's and mine, happens to be Jensen's, which is right next door.
A mainstay.
And we have now anticipation of the Minnesota Vikings moving in with a large operation.
That's going to be great for the newspaper. Just the things we can cover, the photographic opportunities we'll have. It's going to be great.
So, do you have photographers on staff, or is it mostly the reporters?
It's the news people. We did for many years have a very talented photographer named Rick Orendorf, who did photos. He didn't do much in the way of the print journalism. And as part of the pressures I mentioned that the print media has gone through, he was let go, 4 or 5 years ago. And everyone hated to see it, but we weren't all that surprised. Photographers have been one of the first casualties of print's declining revenues. But anyway, I don't know if that was the gist of your question.
No, absolutely. But we have to talk about revenue, as a matter of fact. You rely a lot on advertising, local advertising, sometimes not local, but larger than local advertising, large corporations, classifieds, the whole gamut. But that's what really turns the wheels for newspapers that don't charge for their delivery.
Right. And as far as not charging, I think we're far better off not charging or not using the mail, because we can deliver numbers, 22,000, 25,000 I think I mentioned, in Burnsville, and that's a good number. some advertisers want that kind of
Now,
number.
there's only, between the two communities, 110,000 people.
Right.
So 25,000 papers, when you realize that the size of homes means that it's available to everybody who wants to get the paper. And there are certain places that have drops of multiple copies.
Yes.
And I know by Monday they're all gone. Town hall, the particular gas station I use, and things like that. So people do rely on what they see in the local paper.
You bet.
And
Heck of a deal.
it is a heck of a deal. And so how does the advertising work in terms of driving the paper and paying the salaries?
Well, it's key, and I don't work on that side of it. But I think news organizations, more than ever, realize the symbiosis of what we all do together. And classifieds have, over the years, taken a big hit, from the New York Times down to our humble local level. That's maybe the biggest chunk of revenue that's been lost from the print product.
Is that because of an online presence that
well,
people can go into their computers?
Craigslist seems to have cornered that market for free. But we still have classifieds in our newspaper, and in
You
fact,
have a lot of them.
employers seem to use us quite a bit, which I think is great.
Yeah, I see that jobs, there's a big section in terms of jobs.
Yes.
And we rely on it, for instance, for local tradesmen. We recently needed some specific work done on the lawn.
Right.
And where did we go? We looked in here.
They are in there.
We called several lawn care people, finally settled on one, and came, struck a price, and did a wonderful job to an area that we needed some immediate attention to because it was a flood area and water was running from our hill onto our neighbor's property. They weren't too thrilled with that, nor was I. But the answer was from your advertiser. It's not the first time, it's the one time of many that we have used those pages for just that purpose.
That's great.
And
And we mentioned, if I may,
absolutely.
community changes. Egan has had them. I think every episode you mentioned, the golf courses, the Cedar Grove district, all came with a little pain, a little controversy, prolonged episodes in some
Absolutely.
cases.
Lebanon Hills,
Lebanon Hills.
which is ongoing, really.
It
It's,
is.
And Burnsville has seen many, many changes.
Extremely so. The diversity has mushroomed, and that has ramifications for the schools. Obviously, the city is nearly built out now. That wasn't the case when I got there, although it was fairly mature even at that
And you
time.
have, and the one consistency that they've had in Burnsville is Mayor Couts.
Since the mid-'90s.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, she'll be here, as I mentioned to you earlier, in a few weeks. And she's been here numerous times. We talk about Heart of the City, which was, I think, her idea initially to enhance Burnsville. Now they have the Ames Theater there, which is, having gone through some tough times, is really enjoying some successes now.
The Ames Center, I believe the operating subsidy, i.e. operating loss, is down below $100,000 a year, I think, which I think most people in that industry would tell you is pretty darn respectable. It's a very busy place, and it was very controversial in the approval process.
As many of these things are.
Mayor Couts championed it and did not look back. And there it is.
And she will have an incredible legacy when and if she ever decides to step down. Also, this television station, well, we are now Egan TV. For about 20 years, we were Burnsville-Egan Community Television.
Yes.
And that divorce happened about 4.5 years ago, when Burnsville chose to move the facility into the high school. And here in Egan, we weren't that anxious to do it. We contacted Thomson Reuters through me, having had a background here. They were amenable to it. We contacted the city. Administrator Hedges was amenable to it, and the city council and mayor. And they got together. They built this beautiful facility for us. Most people look at what we have here and say, wow, you don't normally get that in small cities. State-of-the-art studios, state-of-the-art equipment, and there are 4 Egan personnel who are here. They handle Thomson Reuters material, they handle our material, 24-hour a day, television. We couldn't do that probably without the public-private partnership that was created.
And you started all that, did you?
Yeah, I am the troublemaker. Usually when they pick up the usual suspects, they start with me, and then they branch out from there.
No, from everything I've heard, it's a wonderful relationship and a great facility.
And it's been monetarily very beneficial to both entities, because by combining personnel, they're able to answer both their needs much less expensively than they did previously. So,
yeah, so the city actually funds positions down here.
right. And that's sort of the quid pro quo that's worked out so well. And then afternoons and evenings, we have our shows.
Definitely.
And the equipment, the personnel, the really talented personnel. And we cover the football games, we cover the hockey,
Of
we
course.
cover all the
The
sports.
parades.
The parades, absolutely. And so, another important
Please.
thing is death notices.
Yes.
How does that work?
We charge for them. We didn't always. For many years we did not. We don't charge very much. I shouldn't quote a price because I'm not exactly sure. But I think it's
Very important to families, though.
$25. It's the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press charge much more. Obviously, they have monstrous circulation compared with us. But yes, we take them. We used to actually, there was a time when we would go through other newspapers and literally type up facsimiles of the death notices from them to put in our paper, really as a news function. We don't do that anymore. We charge for them.
People know to contact you, though. And it has become, again, on a local level, and I say that it's important to know what's going on in your city. It's important to know what's going on in your neighborhood. And the local paper is really the only place that you can go to rely on that, and as well as death notices, because, you see the passing of somebody whom you knew,
Yes.
or things like that, and obviously you want to react to it or react with the family.
Well, I think you bring that up, I think of that as sort of a gauge of how closely the community still interacts with the newspaper. And I don't know, I'm personally gratified when people feel enough regard for the paper to take out a death notice. That suggests that they think it will be seen.
And they're right. And they're right.
Now, community figures, leaders, die often, and we've done a number of those stories over the years. Obviously, business people, civic leaders,
Or they move on to another position. Or you have somebody coming in new, as we have now a new congressperson
Yes.
in this area. Some people know him, some people don't. So obviously there'll be coverage there. Sports, high school sports, very important.
extremely.
And again, you have to cover it, and you do, and cover it with personnel as well.
High school sports is part of the bedrock of this product. Some would say the bedrock of it. We have one sports person, Mike Shaughnessy. I shouldn't recite his numbers for him, but I believe he covers boys and girls sports at 8 high schools. So an astonishing number of sports.
An almost impossible task.
Well, it takes knowledge of what's going on, it takes watching what's going on, and it takes a sense of fairness and presence of mind to know that if your kid's sport isn't being covered extensively, you might hear from that parent or coach. I think Mike's awesome.
Yeah. Do you have an online presence as well?
We do. It's SunThisWeek.com. And I don't know our numbers very well because I don't see those analytics, but we're there. And generally everything that goes in there, and more, I should say, is on the website.
Which is the way of the world and the way the world is going.
Yes.
So becomes very important. And we actually have a little bit less than a minute and a half left. These half hours seem to go by very quickly.
Well, you make it easy.
Thank you. The secret is having been a lawyer and done a lot of research. I like to do my research, which takes up a lot more time than the normal interview does.
It sure does.
But it makes things move. Also, the familiarity of 18 years of doing this here, hundreds, thousands, I think we're at 1,800 interviews or thereabout.
Congratulations on being archived by the Historical Society.
Dakota County Historical Society. You want to check back on just about anything, predictions that we made, faux pas that we did, listen to what some of your representatives and congresspeople had to say, governors, mayors, senators, U.S. senators, they're all there.
The politics in the two communities have been interesting over the years, too.
True. We've been talking with John Gessner, managing editor of Sun This Week, and I'm sorry it took us so long to get you in, but I really appreciate your time. John, thank you.
Alan, thank you.